good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to WeatherBrains episode 912, the weekly show all about weather. This is the pre-show, the magical, marvelous time of the program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time we say outrageous things. Back on Monday night this week, this is for... let's see, July 10th, 2023. Had a Wednesday night special last week because of the 4th of July. We moved the Monday show to Wednesday, but we should be back on Mondays for a while. Thought last week's show was really good. If you missed it, we had Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference, and his daughter, Hannah Strong, who happens to be a television meteorologist. She's in Louisville. And I thought the whole discussion was great. The father-daughter interaction, the intersection of sports and weather at a very high level. Greg is a very, very important person in the world of college athletics, and I just thought it was a fun show. And if you missed it, go back and listen. That was WeatherBrains 911. Tonight's show should be good. Kevin Law is one of my buddies. He is the Science Operations Officer. The Sioux at the National Weather Service in Birmingham is going to join us. And we hope to have Sharon Reed on the show. She is the director of a daycare facility in Selma, Alabama. And she basically saved dozens of lives during a tornado that came through Selma back in January. And she's never wanted any, attention, but I think it's important to tell the story, because it is a success story about how, and we often criticize the watch warning system and we want it to be better and we get frustrated, but the darn thing works pretty good. And I think it's important to tell the success stories instead of the stories where somebody didn't get the warning and all these failures. So anyway, that's the idea for the show this week. Had an interesting day here today. So I pulled a double shift, and it is no big deal. I am not complaining. I love what I do. I'm happy to work a double shift. It's great. But for those people that deal with television, the morning shift on TV is fairly intense. These morning shows now start at like 4 o'clock and they go on for hours, and you're constantly doing weather hits. So I filled in for Taylor this morning on the morning shift, which means I had to get up at like 1:30 to get the production done that I normally would do in the morning. And the blog discussions, the social media videos that we do. And so it's been an interesting day. And I was not able to do the midday newscast because I had a weather program planned. I do these every day. I was up at a community north of Birmingham this morning, and got that in fine, and we recorded the weather segments for the midday newscast. So if my voice fades, just too much talking today. But now doing a double shift is interesting. The morning show, it's a little more informal, if you will. The evening newscast, it's the Ron Burgundy good evening, where you got to be the the weather guy, but you can kind of let it go a little bit in the morning. We had a good time. And Taylor's had some air travel problems, as many of you have had. We barely made it back. We spent some time up in the Northeast, and we were coming back on a Sunday, and that is dangerous. Taylor got burned, and I almost got burned. We had a 6-hour delay, and thankfully the connecting flight at LaGuardia was delayed by 6 hours. And with 5 minutes to spare, we got on that airplane and got back. But anyway, she was hung up in that mess with the weather yesterday, fouling up the airport travel. So she scheduled to be back tonight. And if not, I'll just work another double shift tomorrow. Evan, another member of our staff, he's got family leave. They have a new baby, so we're kind of thin-staffed right now. So, and I'm sitting here looking at the clock, and it's like 4 minutes to showtime, and there's nobody here but me. That's a little strange. That's great. So after doing a double shift, I got to fill 2 hours of talking, which I could do. I could do that, but you don't want that. That would be excessively boring. All right, here we go. Here comes. All I need is one person to let me know that we're good. Here comes Jen, and we'll bring everybody else in here, and we'll get this thing started at the top of the hour. And if you're new here, the actual show, the produced show, starts at the top of the hour. And here in a couple of minutes, and just move the slider over a couple of minutes, and we'll cut out the nonsense. Jen, I thought I was all by myself this evening, so thank you for being here.
Oh, absolutely. I would never leave you by yourself here. I may have to leave you at some point if things don't calm down in Kansas, but I'm here for now. How are you?
Okay, I'm good. Let's see, I just got a note here that Kevin did not get an invite. Is Bill Murray on the show? Do we know? Because normally he sends out all these invites, and let's see. Let's copy invitation. We're going to stick this in the over here in the text message so we can get Kevin in. Here comes James A. Yeah, I thought everybody was going to be here. I was looking at the clock, and it's like 3 minutes to airtime, and there's nobody here.
I know.
Can I talk for 2 hours by myself? I've done it before. I can do it again, but that would be the most boring Weather Brains ever. I thought last week's show was really fun. I enjoyed that one last week.
I did too. It was great.
Like the father-daughter, relationship and the intersection of weather and really important collegiate level sports.
Yep. I thought that was great.
All right. So I've sent the invitation over to Kevin Laws, so he should be here in just a second. Here comes Troy.
Okay.
I worked a double shift today. James A will appreciate this. James, you ever worked a double shift on the TV side?
I have. Hopefully it was storm related, or did you just inflict this upon yourself?
No, it was an air travel disaster. Our morning meteorologist is stuck in that mess in the Northeast. And she was scheduled to be back Sunday. And there's no way. I mean, when it happened to us, I was trying to find a flight to a nearby city so I could drive back. And it was 2 days before that was going to happen. But she fortunately got a flight out tonight. So allegedly she will be back tonight, and she plans on working tomorrow. But if she's not here, I'll just work another double. It's okay. But that morning shift is intense.
Yeah, it is.
Just hours and hours of about the time you think you got a second to think, you have to hit another weather hit.
Yep.
So
your 5 minutes of break between 400 weather hits.
Yeah, it is very intense. We got Bill on the show. All right, so we're I think under control here.
Yeah, for some reason, your and my emails are not speaking to one another. Yours always come back undeliverable to me. And says your email doesn't accept emails from the Weather Factory.
He's blocked you.
Oops.
Nice.
Yeah, blocked. It's great. Blocked.
So I have to get Troy or Jen or somebody.
Bill, this is James, and James, this is Bill.
And it's the top of the hour here. Let's welcome our television viewers. Thank you for being here. We're back on our Monday night schedule this week after a Wednesday night special last week. It's Monday night. We have no active weather here. In fact, it's kind of odd. Not a single shower. Oh yeah, he's looking good.
He is, man. Look at Neil, man.
Very nice.
Rustic.
Rustic.
It looks like he's been out fishing or hunting or something.
Yeah.
I've been working 24 hours a day in my office.
Well, that too. Yeah, I totally understand. That'll give you that look as well. All right, let's see. Kevin, do you know Neil? Dr. Neil?
He's probably heard of him.
Working on it.
They're working on the audio there.
Okay. It's like Kevin, and is that Gerald Satterwhite on there with him?
That's right. Yeah, he's our stand-in tonight because our other guests couldn't be on for some reason. So
Okay.
we're just gonna have a in-house weather service show.
No, I like it. I like it a lot. We had we'll talk about it in the show. I always hate to get good content in the pre-show. In fact, I'll hold that. In fact, let's get this thing started here. Let's roll it. All right. Here's track 1. Here's track 2. And here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. WeatherBrains episode number 912. This is the weekly show all about weather. This is for the 10th of July, 2023, here in the old dog days of summertime. We are back on our Monday schedule, and good to see everybody. Neil, good to have you back. How you been?
I've been good. Seems like a while since I've been here, so can't remember exactly what I've been up to, but it's probably been a lot of fun.
If you can't remember it, that probably means it was pretty fun.
Yeah. All right. And I see Dr. James Adelot is on the line. James, how you doing?
Doing really well. I just calculated we have 168 shopping days left until Christmas.
44 days till the first Alabama football game for me.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
the most important one. Or is it 54 days? One of those numbers.
That'll work. Let's see here. I believe that we got Rick Smith with us this week. Rick, good to have you back. How you been?
He was having audio issues, I think, for a second.
Can't see
back.
right now. Yeah.
Oh, here he goes. I see he had dropped off there. Let's go up to Jen. Jen, I know that Jen's connection is good. Jen, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. Staying busy as usual, but awesome. And a beautiful day up here in the Ohio Valley. A little warmish, but very nice. And just doing my thing, waiting on Kansas storms to distract me. But right now, I do Hayes, Kansas. So that's got my interest right now. But there's a few little thunder boomers out there, but nothing too shabby.
Yours like staying busy with all your munchkins and everyone. I noticed today we got a first-time newsletter this morning from Tornado.
I decided to start a brand new newsletter. It's called the Tornado Talk Weekly.
Yeah.
And so it's a little update on this week in tornado history. And so apparently I like doing newsletters. So I'm going to be doing 2 a week.
All right. Good deal. So Troy, how you doing? How hot is it in Austin?
105, 112. Who's counting?
A lot of white numbers on GR Earth.
It is. It's bad. It's 104 at Camp Mabry just a little while ago. So it's all I know. Plenty warm and indications that the upper level ridge either is overhead or to the west over the next 3 or 4 years. And just kind of hanging out.
That thing looks like it's like 6,000 meters at 500 millibars. That's nasty. I mean, that is nasty. Goodness gracious. Well, you keep it there. Okay. All right, Rick Smith, can you hear us? Is the tin can working here?
Uh-oh.
Maybe
I think
not.
ERCOT got him.
Oh
no. Let's see. We will try and get Rick on here in a second. All right, so let's unmute. Well, Bill Murray, let's bring in I'll let you introduce our guests here. Go. You are our official guest introduction guy. Go.
Yeah, James. We had planned tonight to bring on an Alabama hero, American hero, Sharon Reed, but for some reason we couldn't get her on tonight. So we'll schedule that for another day. But whenever you've got Kevin Laws in the room, you got a good show.
Look out.
He's even gone out tonight and got Gerald Satterwhite, who I realized we never had on the show and needed to have on. So we're welcoming meteorologist Gerald Satterwhite and, of course, the Science and Operations Officer from the National Weather Service in Birmingham, Kevin Laws, who's a longtime friend and the Alec Baldwin of our podcast. He's been on more than anybody else. I don't know. He probably doesn't know how to take that. So anyway, unmute yourself, Kevin, and it's good to see you and Gerald. How are y'all tonight?
I was going to say, I didn't shoot anybody. I didn't go that
far. Whoa. Too early?
We
title.
have an official WeatherBrains robe for you tonight since you've been on so many times. But Kevin, introduce us to Gerald here. Let Gerald tell us a little bit about his background and how he got into weather and all all the normal accoutrements. What gave him the genetic defective gene that we all share?
Yeah, Gerald's been here since 2015, and he's from sort of my old stomping grounds out in beautiful North Carolina. So he started out his career, I guess, volunteership out at Morehead City, but I'll let him take it away.
Yeah, sure. I've been interested in meteorology, like many other folks, since I was a kid, about 5 years old. Mom told me the story about going out in the yard and shaking the tree, pretending that there was a tornado, that sort of thing. But my dad was in the military, so I moved around quite a bit. I was actually born in Virginia, just lived there maybe 2 or 3 years. Moved to Huntsville, Alabama, and lived there about another 3 years. And there was some sort of tornado event in the mid 90s. I guess it was around 96, when my parents were at work and I was at home. And I just remember watching television coverage and tornado sirens going off. So that really captured my attention as well. You know, weather is always changing. So there was something to do every day when I was out of school during the summer. And then I moved to North Carolina when I was about 8 years old and pretty much grew up there. You know, like Kevin mentioned, I volunteered at the National Weather Service in Morehead City. I actually started there fairly young. In high school, they were letting me go over there, and they were pretty open about it. I could go over there whenever I wanted, stay for however long I wanted. So there were times I was at the weather office between 8 and 10 hours when there was severe weather going on. Went to college at University of North Carolina in Asheville. So went from, you know, near the beach on the east side of North Carolina to up in the mountains. And after that, I got a job in the private sector up in Maryland. I was there for about 3.5 years. Our company had a contract through the Department of Homeland Security. So we did weather forecasting for clients on the Mexico border, Florida Keys, and over in Puerto Rico. But I always knew I wanted to be in the National Weather Service. I mean, that's where I was volunteering when I was a kid. So I was finally able to get in here at the Birmingham office and have been here since.
So you came to Birmingham before the NIL deals that Kevin has now when he's recruiting forecasters. So are you holding out for some NIL money one day, Gerald, or what's it going to take here?
Well, I gotta get my checkbook out. Gerald's, you know, he's just kind of a jack of all trades. And severe weather, you know, we have certain spots we like to put people in, and Gerald usually gets the spots that are left over. So he gets mad at me a lot because he didn't get a lot of radar time. So he's one of those that can do everything well. So unfortunately, he has to fill in for whoever's missing. So he can communicate, he can launch the best weather balloons you've ever seen, and he can sit down and run that radar like nobody's business. So he's a top-notch employee. Plus, he does great on the outreach. He helps us out with the deaf and hard of hearing community. He helps us out in the Spanish-speaking populations and things like that. So he's really gone out to these underserved communities quite a bit and done a lot of hard work for us. And you know, sometimes we talked about it before, but sometimes we get in this, you know, Jefferson Shelby County corridor and we think the rest of the world is like us. And you know, just one county away, there's a lot of underserved communities that don't keep up with the weather every day, don't know what a weather radio is. And these are the people that we really need to get out there and reach for sure.
Yeah, talk about how that's been rewarding for you, Gerald. Talk about that process, because that's really cool and admirable.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been out to several schools in Central Alabama, either virtually or back during COVID or in person recently. Tara and I went down into Tallapoosa County. So yeah, it's pretty cool to be able to go out and talk to young kids that are interested in science, or they may be on the fringes of being interested in science, and just drawing them in, just showing different weather videos to the kids down there at the elementary school in Tallapoosa County. You get all the oohs and ahs, and you can see them, being interested. And then you can throw in some of the safety tips they can take home to their parents and whatnot. So it's just really fun to engage with the younger folks and get our message out there.
Do they make you the same kind of cakes and cookies like they make Span when he comes calling?
No, I haven't reached that tier just yet. No.
Well, it's coming for sure. So you've been there since 2015, like Kevin said. Talk about some of the bigger events that you worked and some of the ones that stick in your mind as it's quite memorable across Central Alabama.
Oh, geez. Yeah, there's been quite a few events since I've been here with tornado outbreaks. We had a significant tornado earlier this year that went through Selma and then Sauga County all the way into Georgia. That storm continued, but also flash flooding in the Birmingham, Hoover, Vestavia Hills areas. We've had some fairly big snow events. Big one down in I-85 where they shut the interstate down. So yes, definitely active here. I like active weather, so this is a good place to be. You know, you kind of get a mixture of all the severe weather, flooding, tropical weather, and the occasional winter storm. As far as ones that stick out, geez, it's hard for me to pluck one out of the air, but
Probably Auburn,
Auburn, Lee County,
Beauregard. I mean, there's just been so many.
yeah.
And, you know, each event is unique from a different angle. So, you know, Beauregard's, you know, can stand out for its own reasons. And, you know, Fultondale or something like that, or Ohatchee has its, you know, own reasons they can stand out. So definitely a busy area for sure.
So did you experience a lot of hurricanes in eastern North Carolina? Do you like hurricanes or tornadoes or winter weather any more than any other phenomenon, or is it all kind of the same level in your book?
Yeah, I definitely like severe weather and tornadoes the most. It's actually my yearly vacation. I go out in the Great Plains.
Oh,
and
that's
follow
right.
storms
You
there.
chase some. I saw you
Yeah.
chasing this year.
So I
Talk
do
about
weather
some
at
of
work
those
and then weather
experiences.
in my free time.
Yeah, we can't get away
So-
from it. Any interesting chase experiences the last few years?
Oh yeah, for sure. 2016 Dodge City, that storm put out multiple tornadoes, like at least a dozen tornadoes. There's all kinds of storms up in Montana and New Mexico and whatnot. But yeah, I did experience some hurricanes in eastern North Carolina. I got there in '98, so there was, you know, Bonnie and Floyd that came through, and then, you know, years later Irene. But where I lived in New Bern is where I grew up. We never really had a whole lot of high winds. I mean, there were some trees that got knocked down, but thankfully in our neighborhood we escaped the high winds and flooding. You know, Floyd was a big inland flooder up there toward Kinston and Greenville. So yeah, I'll say I like tornadoes, and then, you know, everything after that too: winter storms, tropical systems.
Yeah, I know Kevin was saying you're kind of the utility guy. You can do anything in the office. I noticed last night you were in charge of the balloon launch, weren't you? And it got contaminated by storms. It was you, right? Am I remembering that wrong?
Yes. Yeah, I waited. We have about an hour and a half window where we can launch the balloon for it to be considered a 0Z balloon. And I waited till, you know, the last 15 minutes, and there was just still too much convection around to launch the balloon. So I could have launched it, but it would have moved into some storms that were just east of here, and the data would have been useless. So saved a little bit of equipment and taxpayer dollars on that one.
Hey, while we're talking balloons, Bill, let me interrupt real quick. When do you guys tell the story about what people brought in there today?
Oh, that balloon, that song.
Oh, yes.
You want to go grab it?
Yeah, let me go grab it real quick.
Yeah, this is a great story. Great story.
Yeah.
So Kevin, how much is were you putting it together an all-star team like you have at Birmingham now? It seems like to me. How much of that is you going after the meteorologists and just luck of the draw and pulling them in?
Yeah, I think we're a little bit unique here because, you know, we kind of have assignments, especially when it comes to impact weather like severe weather. And so it gives us an advantage because, you know, if somebody becomes a lead forecaster, moves on, retires, whatever, then we kind of know what spots we need to fill. Do we need a great communicator? Do we need somebody who's an ace at social media? Do we need a forecaster who can just grind it out, you know, write those AFDs and help us in that way? Is a great radar operator. So we could, you know, we could sort of look at the resumes and kind of critique, you know, sort of narrow in on the kind of person that we want. But here lately, you know, some of these guys, these newer guys that we got here, Daniel, Alex Sizemore, Jason Davis, that we've had on before. Some of these guys are just, they're good at everything. So it's worked out well for us. So go ahead, show that.
All right. So yes, apparently someone came to our office today with this radio song that they have had sitting. I don't know if it's in their garage or storage shed.
Can you get it closer?
It's full of bugs, so I'm trying not to drop them all. But the guy said he collected it about 40 years ago, back behind Shelby County Humane Society. So that's over in the Columbiana area. So yeah, this is about the size of a shoebox. This is way before my time here. The inside, you can just see if I can hold it up here. Got all the internal instrumentation there, different dials, and the thing looks like a bell. I don't know what that's for.
Now, they launched those back in Centerville back then, didn't they?
Yeah, yeah. So this has the battery where you had to dip it in the water to activate it.
Yep.
And then you put it in there, and you can see all the computer components there. So we go from that Radioson to this one. You can see it's much smaller. I put on that post, it's about the size of a solo cup. So you can see the difference there in the size. But I mean, they do the same thing, temperature, moisture, wind speed, wind direction, and pressure, but much smaller.
Do y'all routinely put dates on those things, write dates on them, by the way, before you launch them? I just wondered.
Oh, we did on the ones we were using before this. We switched over to this, I guess, within the past year and a half or so. And the other one, there was a spot where, you would label the day's date and if it was a 12Z or 0Z launch and where it's launched from. This one doesn't have that on there. I mean, we could probably write that on here anywhere, but it's just because the label's not there, it hasn't been in practice.
I just wonder if there's any indication of when that previous one, the one from the old days, had been launched.
Yes, I think our lead forecaster, Mark Linares, was saying there used to be, or there was a spot on here, but it's either weathered away or wasn't filled out. So I'm not sure the exact date.
That's amazing.
But
and Dr. Kim Coco McLean, we're not turning it into Radioson brains, but Kevin and Gerald from the Weather Service in Birmingham had the opportunity to get an old son delivered to them today from someone who'd had it in their garage for about 40 years. And
40 years. Oh my gosh. That's incredible. I was wondering why it was massive. It's massive. This is a Radioson brick. That's incredible.
Yeah, so it looks like it went up this way because there's a string at the top here. So I guess flying through the air was vertical like that.
Looks like a grocery bag.
Right? Can you imagine
somebody over here
finding that like falling in
Don't
your
go
yard?
there,
So now Kevin has bug parts all over his desk.
Probably not the first time.
Oh well.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, that's just too funny. So we Kim tonight, welcome to the show. We were going to talk to someone I really wanted you to meet tonight, Sharon Reed, who was the lady who was in Alabama, an American hero back on January 12th when the tornado hit Selma. She apparently knew her stuff and had a plan, and that plan saved the day for about 70 kids in that daycare center. Kevin, take us back to that day, because we need to honor what she did that night. I had like 82 questions to ask her, and I bet you had another 160 you could have asked her, Kim. But let's kind of dig into that for a minute, what Sharon did that day.
Yeah, I hate that she's not here. Couldn't make it to tell her story because it's a remarkable one. We have seen tragedy in this state so much over the last decade and more, and it's just finally to hear a story about somebody doing the right things at the right time and really knowing what to do, knowing a plan that you have. And the lead time for the Selma tornado was a long time, and she was watching television. She had turned it on, she got the alert, watched television, and it should take you back before that, because like we always talk about, the warning process really starts way in advance of the actual warning, knowing what kind of day you're facing. And she had already briefed her staff at 6:30 that morning that, hey, today's a higher risk day for tornadoes, and I want everybody to be vigilant and do what you're supposed to when it's time and if we need to. And so she'd already briefed her entire staff, and she had a staff of 12, and so there was 82 people in the building. And so the warning went out a little after 11, I think, 11:15, 11:20 a.m. That's unusual for us around here. Normally we're past 5, 6 p.m., right, and through the overnight. And so the school situation was a challenge, just period, that day, because they were confused. Usually they let out early, but if it's like, you can't let out early today because you're going to be on the road, on buses on the road during the meat of the system. So as the line was coming through, and it overperformed a little bit, I thought, from what we were had on initial forecast. And so warning went out 11:30 or a little before 11:30, and so they took their precautions, and which is normal, like you would in a school hallway, interior hallway as best you can. And so they all 71 kids, 70 kids, 12 staff members, they did their thing, put their books over their head and the whole 9 yards. And then, she kept following the coverage on television. I'm not sure. I think she was following Josh Johnson, who we've had on the show before, I think WSFA. And, he's on there. Everybody, I was nervous because we had a warning in Chilton County that was expiring and we couldn't get rid of. And I was worried that our folks up here were focusing way too much on Chilton County, which is a nothing. Meanwhile, this monster was just on Selma's doorstep. And I was scared because that thing looked like a monster on the radar. I'm gonna show you. I'll when I get done here, I'll dig up some pictures and show you too if there's a way to share the screen. But she knew it was coming. Josh was on there screaming, "Hey, this is on the ground. This is bad. Do something now!" And so with 10 minutes to go, she just changed the plan and I asked her why. I said, "Why did you change the plan at last minute? You had this plan. Everybody was following it. You were doing the right thing." And she changed it on the fly. And she said, "I've always heard that interior bathrooms were the safest place." And they only had 4 of them for 82 people. And she crammed 82 people into 4 bathrooms. And the teachers, they're daycare teachers, they're college students, they're high school students, some of them. I mean, they're young, and they sacrificed themselves. They put themselves in harm's way, covered the kids as best they could as that building just ripped completely apart. And I'm telling you, and I'll show you some pictures of the aftermath of that building. It's just incredible that anybody could walk out of there, much less walk out of there without a single scratch. They had one 1-year-old out of 82 people had a little small cut on the forehead that didn't even require a Band-Aid. That's the only injury in that entire building. So it's amazing to see it. And the community reached out afterwards, and they helped out a lot, great deal. They're going to rebuild, but it's going to take 2 years. But in the meantime, other daycares, other churches have opened their doors to them and allowing them to use that facility until they get rebuilt. But this is an amazing story. Amazing that she changed the plan and just thought, hey, we can do a little bit better, a little bit safer here. And she certainly did it. So it's incredible.
Hey, Kevin, when did you all, just from a operations standpoint, with that county being on the edge of your county warning area, how far in advance on a day like this are you focusing in on one storm as it moves across an adjacent CWA, but toward you?
Yeah, I think in this case, that was basically the one storm that was overproducing, right? So it's kind of an easy one. We had an early one that came out and was hit Greensboro, which is a little north of Selma. It's up, Green Hill counties, Bibb County. We had, but the environment was really rich in that zone down there between Selma and Montgomery and over. And so we were able to really focus in on that one supercell. And, we've talked about it many times. Jim Stefkovich has been here many years. He talks about, you can have one tornado, but if it's in the wrong place at the wrong time, then it's going to be a major problem for you, media wise, injury wise. So in this particular case, this supercell, I think it cycled through about 3 times. And the second cycle through is when it went through Watauga County. That's when it really hit maximum strength and it killed 7 people, all of them in manufactured homes. And I'll tell you that story too. That's the same that I hear all the time. It's such a repetitive story that the people in these, they thought there was a home that was safe because it was down in like a little valley-ish area. And those large tornadoes, they don't discriminate. There's no such thing as a sheltered valley area. So they went to the one mobile home that was in the valley area and just, it obliterated that mobile home. So it was very tragic. And I've heard that story so many times that people just have this false notion because that's what they've always done, always heard, and I've tried to dispel that every time we go out on outreach, we try to dispel those kind of myths, just to no avail sometimes. So, but it's, it came across Coosa County, and I think it would have probably gotten close to an EF4. It didn't have the type of damage that it needed to. It didn't have the type of structure damage that would have an EF4. But I think right there through that part where the fatalities were, we could have easily seen that, especially the way the trees look. They were just completely sheared off and just a lot of debarking and things going on too.
So Kevin, how did she gain her weather savviness? Just years of experience. Why was she so good at it? Because we need more and more of these ambassadors wherever we can place them.
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish she was here to answer, but from what I know is, she's, being responsible for daycare. I guess you've got to take on certain things, CPR, first aid, and weather is just has to be taken on down here for sure. We were talking about that education outreach before, and Gerald goes into a lot of schools. That's something we're really working on too. Is just trying to, I've gone with James a couple of times to some school visits and things, and so he knows how to talk to what's your favorite grade? Third grade. So
third grade is the greatest.
Yes. So and they pile them all in right from K all the way through 12 sometimes, and so it's sort of hard to be able to talk to people. But the one thing I always impress to people is what do you do if your clothes catch on fire and everybody stop, drop, and roll? And I'm like, how do you know that? How do you know to stop, drop, and roll? And they talk about how the firemen, I guess, they let you play on the fire truck and it grabs your attention. They got stop, drop, and roll. But then I say, well, how many people do you know ever had their clothes catch on fire? It just doesn't happen. And then meanwhile, we can't get the safety messages into the schools like they need to be here to get those proper instructions and develop a plan for your family like they do with fire. They seem to have a market on the education.
I think that's a good question, Bill. Maybe Kim can chime in on this. Like Kevin's approaching it from like a responsibility angle, but I guess you can also have people that are maybe concerned or have some level of fear about weather, so they're going to be tracking it more closely. And if you have some of those people in the right positions, if it's a daycare or school or senior center or whatever, those people can be really beneficial. And I guess applying their concern to keeping other people safe that they're looking after.
Yeah, it's just.
Sorry, go ahead, Bill.
No, go ahead, Ken.
We tend to think of this so much as an individual making decisions for themselves and trying to target them and their mind and their knowledge. And the way that most people do make choices is in groups. And the people who often are taking care of groups of people, like friend groups, families, daycares, they're often women. And something that's a characteristic we know from just risk decision science across all kinds of domains of risk, but it's certainly true for weather too. Women are much more risk averse, and they tend to take on these roles of being sort of, very, very aware just of potential threats, and they take it upon themselves to make sure everybody is aware of what's going on. And they're often in this role of getting people into a sheltering location. And anyone who ever watched those Tornado Video Classics movies, just the whole series is priceless. All the videos that we had of tornadoes in the 80s feature some guy, typically filming it with his wife standing behind him screaming, John, get inside. And that is a trope for a reason. We see it very commonly in our research. That's kind of the roles people take on. But something that you mentioned too, that it's just this thing about the people who are concerned about these threats. And so they act to help, broader institutions too. And I saw this when I went to Alabama and Mississippi after the 2011 outbreak. There are people who are in our community, just diffused throughout it, that are normal people, and they know so much about the weather, and they are listening to everything you say. And some of them have more practical knowledge than many of us do. It's incredible what they're able to do and the way that they're able to make sense of everything. And we can't discount that. So it's not just incumbent on individuals to all be making choices for themselves. This is the biggest reason that, studies that you see that are like survey based on, 50% of people understand this or prefer this color or whatever, like that might not matter. You might only need to really reach about 25% of people and have them really understand it for it to diffuse completely through networks. That's something that we're still grappling with a little bit. And it's something that's important to think about before we change our systems. There are people who are really well adapted to this stuff, who perform these sentry roles in their families and in their businesses. And so what you're talking about with this woman, oh, I wish that she had been here, because my gut is that she is one of these people. And she could tell us so much about the intelligence that she's built up, you know, the way that she's able to assemble information, and it just would probably wow us. And, you know, it's those kinds of pieces of testimony that give me so much confidence. But I'm so glad you got to meet with her, and your point about getting this word out and education. You know, even if you can't reach everybody, if you are still able to reach the people who are interested, they can do a whole lot of good for a whole lot of people. And it's definitely worth thinking about that.
Yeah, I don't know if Kevin, if you or Gerald or anyone else on the staff there are locally in Selma got the chance to ask her, you know, what her sources of information were, how she used, you know, apps and NOAA weather radio and television and all the various sources, you know, what worked well for her. Did you get to learn any of that information?
Yeah, I was searching for the pictures there. Sorry, but the way I understood it is she carried her iPad around. You know, she had most of her work on there, and on severe weather days, when she keeps up with it, I think she follows a couple media outlets. James's Twitter page, Josh's, and so she gets multiple sources of information, and you know, she keeps up with it. And then on the severe weather days, she keeps that television on her iPad with her the whole time, so just right here in her hand, waiting on that to happen. So that's what makes it even more amazing. Today's your day. It's like, you know, how would you know today's going to be your day? But it certainly was for her. I don't know, can't even go through that thought process.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to have her on in real time here soon, in a few weeks. And I thank you for, you know, trying to set that up, Kevin. Of course, we had Josh and Amanda back with us, you know, right after the event happened in January, and you could feel the emotion in that entire show. You know, we've done that several times with big shows after terrible events, and you could always feel that impact. And you know, I can remember the messaging that day. It was very clear and spot on. Of course, we have 2 hotels in Selma, and you know, we were able to give them a long lead time and get all the guests into safe places, and you know, have the GM report to us what they were seeing. You know, fortunately, the tornado ended up going just east of those 2 properties, but you know, the people that are in your care really appreciate that. You know, they're glad someone's watching out for them, and it really pays off on a day like that.
Yeah, it certainly did. And do you have a way to share the screen? Can I share my screen?
Yeah, I bet James has already enabled it for you.
We
or
can
he can right
make
now.
that happen. Go.
All right. Let's see if I can do this. I have to share a window. I'll try the entire screen here. All right. So this is, let me know when you can see it.
We can.
Okay. So this is one of the classrooms that the kids are in. Always amazing to see what's on the board up there. The kids' names and the boys on one side, girls on the other side, and then you got the numbers and all that stuff. So this is one of the classrooms they would have been in. This is the building itself. So seeing a close-up of that, and this is actually the side of the building. So it struck on the side of the building, not the front of it. I thought this was the front, and it's not. It's actually the side. And so you can see that a lot of that collapsed. So the hallways, the interior hallways were just completely demolished. And then another angle of it. But here's the side view, another side view here, of just how it just ripped apart. And this was the highest, I think this is the highest damage indicator for the entire storm. So it got close to the EF3 level, but not quite there. And this is the bathroom. This is one of the examples of the bathroom. You see the ceiling tiles are blown off, but look, a little bit of debris in there, but really untouched. And all 4 of them were almost exactly the same, just like this. So
could you imagine being the parent coming to that scene, you know, hoping your child made it and just seeing that destruction?
Oh, I know. And knowing that it's, you know, I guess it's I guess it's West Dallas Street or West Dallas Highway. There's Highway 22, and it just came up straight up Highway 22, and it's on there. It's pretty close. It's couple doors down from the Selma Country Club, and you talk about the large trees, probably 200-year-old trees, and every one of them was uprooted. I mean, every single one on that golf course. So it was unbelievable. But overall, Selma is not a town that has a lot of manufactured homes. It has a lot of older estate homes downtown, and a lot of what I would consider, older, but more, well-built structures for the time. And the structure damage was very light. A lot of large trees down there in town as well. So I think they were pretty sheltered. So even though the tornado was extremely wide and stayed at that intensity, not a lot of injuries, not a single fatality, at least on that side of that storm. So not a good chance to talk to a lot of people too, as far as getting the warning and doing what they're supposed to do. So it really worked out. And I thought it was going to be a disaster. The way it looked on radar was just incredible. I hadn't seen one like that since Beauregard.
Yeah, it was a terrifying day, that's for sure. You mentioned the community response. Of course, historically, Selma's a famous town in American history and in Alabama history too. But it seemed like the community response was really spectacular in the wake of the tornado.
Yeah, we learned our lesson about trying to survey in the downtown area the day after, because it was very difficult. We almost had to get out on foot and just walk it. And if you recall, it was very cold the next day, so wasn't like we won't stand around too long outside. But yeah, just walking, talking to people, and seeing the community response. Selma's a very, like you said, it's a historic city, very tight knit city, community as well, and so neighbors helping neighbors, as you typically see in this part of the state. And you certainly had that going on there in Selma, even out in Autauga County, everywhere. So it's just good to see that people are talking about it, responses. And in fact, I think Thursday night, evening, we're going back down there for our first community meeting since the tornado. So hopefully we'll be able to have a listening session down there and hear and share some experiences with people. So that'll be Thursday evening, I think around 6. Where's that, Wallace?
Yeah, it's at Wallace Community College in Selma, from 5 to 7 p.m.
Okay.
So Jason Davis, it's kind of a 2-part thing. There's going to be a kind of an amended spotter class that Jason Davis will be teaching, and then John DeBlock will be there with the county EM conducting that listening session.
Yeah, that's pretty cool stuff for sure. So James A. was joking earlier, Kevin, there's a statue to you outside their office in Tulsa. Of course, Birmingham has gotten a lot of notoriety for what you've done to help improve the warning process for your customers here in Central Alabama. So talk about some of the things that continue to evolve out of that process. And we've had you on here several times to describe what you've done. So brief us a little bit on that and talk about how that's a continual evolving process.
Yeah, sure. Everything stems from the unacceptable death toll in 2011, whether it be Joplin or here in Alabama, anywhere. And I think we had a real, the old famous saying, come to Jesus meeting a few months after that. And we decided in this office, we're going to make it a priority to fix what we can fix. And so we set out to do that very thing. And, I think the number one thing it takes, which, I can't speak for every office and the entire agency, but what it takes is for us to make it a priority, number one priority, and I think that's how a lot of people fail at a goal or whatever. They lose track and they get on to other things and things slip back to the way they were. We decided we weren't going to let that happen. And so, we focus on the science of those environments. And I think what happens, when young people are coming through radar school, that's the only school that we go to now is radar school. And so when young people are going through that, the way they sort of learn radar, I think, and get into bad habits is they just look at radar scan to scan to scan, right? Every scan comes in 3 minutes, next scan comes in 3 minutes. And there's some kind of threshold in their head when the velocity couplet gets this strong, then I'm going to issue a tornado warning. So, and everybody has their own thresholds. Every office has their own say. So it's just, it's almost random, a random chance of when you're going to get one and when you're not. So we wanted to eliminate that because that's just about the worst thing you can do as far as issuing a warning. And we wanted to incorporate the environment. You know, we talk about famously that we were issuing a lot of warnings, false alarms on these high base storms. And this is not the Midwest. We don't get tornadoes with high base storms. I think all total, since 1950, we had about 12 tornadoes from LCLs that were higher than, say, 1,100,000 meters. So we just don't get them. And so we were able to right there eliminate a lot of our damage. I think what we did here was we compared the environments of the tornado, not the tornadoes, but the tornado warnings. And we wanted to see where the environment could help us shave a lot of that off. So I was just looking before we came on here. I think for this year, 2023, we have 28% false alarm and a 77 POD and an 18-minute lead time. So we have about the best stats we've had in the 12 years we've been doing this. So, and it's a credit to these guys because they work hard at it. And we have so many events here. It's hard to sit down and train on it and simulate because most of the time we're burnt out. And we finally got 2 days here of thunderstorm free weather. It's been the June from hell from what I've considered. And this El Nino June is just killing us here. And every day we're out there issuing warnings. There's risk every single day. And we're probably going to go right back into it later this week. And it's wearing us down a little bit. El Nino is always like that with the subtropical jet coming over. But these guys are here day in and day out, 365. You know, when you're home opening your Christmas presents on December 25th, these guys are in here working. You know, they're always here covering. And enough can't be said for the kind of job that they do to be on the weather watch that long is very hard to do sometimes.
Hey, can I say something real quick, Bill? I'm sorry.
Absolutely. I was going to let James A say something, but I knew I wanted you to come in right here because you can speak to those numbers, James, what they mean to you.
Yeah, and I will say in the last few months, maybe this calendar year, I'm starting to feel a little disturbance in the force. This is just one example of what not that. Hang on, wrong one. That's the cake I got today. Not that. Let's see. Let's see if that works. No. Well, hang on. There we go. Can y'all see that now?
Yeah, it's SPC related tweet.
Yes. And for those that are listening, I'll just read this tweet. It says, James, when is the Storm Prediction Center going to do better? People like me listen. Another day of slight risk. And this was Sunday. This was yesterday. It used to mean more. One day, no one will listen and death and casualties will happen. Where is the accountability? When I miss at my job, I'm accountable and I'm not responsible for lives. And I'm seeing a lot of this. I do think that there's a trend within NOAA, and maybe Neil can speak to this, and maybe it's just me, but I think I can feel the heartbeat of people is that there's more aggressiveness in issuing watches and warnings. More watches, more warnings, and what we need to do is look at facts. Opinion doesn't matter. We should have hard numbers, that like Kevin just shared the POD and the FAR numbers out of Birmingham. But Kevin, what you've done, you've kind of gone in the other direction. Instead of issuing warning and warning and warning and warning and warning and warning, you've cut back on them. What's the deal? What can we do to kind of get others around the country on your program here, if that makes any sense?
I think that, again, it comes down to what your boss cares about, right? So at the end of everything. So if your boss cares about the warning program and improving it, and we'll have your back to do it, because you have to do it. The culture and our culture was ingrained and we were stuck, right? And the POD wasn't awful, but it was high 60s to low 70s for decades, and the false alarm rate would be in the 80s consistently. And to change that culture and to try to do it within a year or overnight or whatever, I mean, that is a very hard thing to do, because you have to make a lot of hard decisions, and a lot of it involves people, and science people are sometimes not people. So it's you have to deal with personalities and people somehow, and we've kind of done this to ourselves a little bit. we focus so much that the radar operator, the person who pushes that button, is the most important job in this office. And I totally disagree with that. I mean, it is important, but it's not as important as other things that we do here, like communicating. You know, Gerald sometimes works the social media during these events. And if those people are not doing what they're supposed to be doing at a high level, these warnings go for nothing. So I had to convince people that the other roles are just as important, and to get away from the fact that you think your worthiness as an employee or a forecaster, meteorologist has to do with issuing tornado warnings just doesn't fly with me. But what I mean is the agency sort of does it to itself because, like I said, it's the only school you go to now. So they've put an importance on it, and they should. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but we had to get out of that mindset that, hey, we're going to be a team. And, you know, I like it to a baseball team. It's like the shortstop doesn't go to the coach and say, let me go pitch today, or let me go play the catcher today. The coach would tell them to get lost. So, you know, it's the same people playing the same positions all the time, and they get very, very good at them. And that way everybody knows what to expect when they come in, what they're going to be doing, how long they're going to be doing it for, and they just can do it at a very high level. And that's what I mean about Gerald here. He can do all the trades, so he sort of mixes up because he can do everything at a high level. And so I don't even have a social media page personally, so I wouldn't know the first thing about it. So what sense would it make to put me in that position? And I'll tell you a quick story. This is from 2008. Anybody remember was it Super Tuesday outbreak of 2008? Remember that one? It was February 2nd, I think. It's an overnight event. There was a couple F4s, I think. Killed a lot of people in Tennessee as well, if I recall correctly. And I was young. I was not even a lead forecaster at the time, and I came in at 4 o'clock in the morning. That was an overnight event, of course. And I came in at 4 o'clock in the morning, and the lead forecaster who was on duty at the time, I said, what do you need me to do? You know, I was a team player. And he said, I need you to sit down here and communicate these warnings. Well, I'm an introvert. I can't communicate worth anything. And after about 10 minutes, this is a very high level event. And I stood up and I said, hey, I just can't do this at the level that y'all need somebody to do this. So instead of moving me to a position where I could be more beneficial, he stuck me in the corner doing basically nothing. So I got punished because I was honest, but I just couldn't fulfill that role. And I said, this is ridiculous. We're not working as a team. That really struck a nerve with me at the time, and finally got in a position to do something about it. And this is the kind of changes that come from that. It's just, we got to work to our strengths and play to our strengths. And that's the way we really succeed.
Well, let me say one more thing and I'll stop talking because everybody else needs to chime in here. It's and again, just looking at it from a distance, and I am not a weather service employee. I just look at it from a distance. Do you think that maybe some of the culture is kind of affecting some of the thought process and those that are issuing watches and warnings from the weather entertainers? They are successful. They reach more people than you, than me, than anybody on this show. They do. And they thrive on fear. You have to have extreme weather. You've got to have it. You cannot have a calm day. You cannot have a day with no hurricanes or no tornadoes. Something has to be going on. Is that creeping into the watch warning process where you got to be aggressive? You got to be aggressive. You got to get page views. You got to get clicks. You got to get this stuff, and to do it, you got to issue warning and warning and warning and warning. Is that got anything to do with it at all, or is it just me losing my mind?
I used to think that way too, but I go to weather conferences like you do. In fact, we have a SUE conference coming up in Denver next month, and there's nobody who doesn't. The people in this agency take their job very serious, and I don't think they're out to get clicks and to get views. People at the Storm Prediction Center the same way, and I think they're really in the business to try their best. And I think there are people certainly who are a little bit more proactive, maybe is the word, or maybe they just a fear of having to issue a watch when the level of the forecast wasn't high enough to warrant that. And so I think there's some of that where you don't want to miss anything. And I think that's kind of a newer forecast. We talked about the way they issue warnings. They also have a fear of missing anything. So they just will rather carpet bomb the entire line, the entire CWA with warnings instead of missing one single one. And with this, how many have we missed? We've missed quite a few. I mean, not as many as I thought we were going to miss, but we've missed some. I mean, it happens. And the problem I was having with it before is we were missing them already. So it wasn't like anything had really changed. So we still had the POD that's going to be in the 70s. I don't think we've ever quite got it out. I think Rick, I looked y'all's numbers up and y'all are 91 on your POD. So y'all are actually kicking our rear ends on the POD side because we're like 77, but you still are 91. So you're going to have a certain percentage that you always miss, and they're not always QLCS tornadoes or whatever. There's going to be other ones that you miss. A lot of them, could be issues with the distance from the radar. It could be the fact the environment's tricking us, and it was, it's overproducing like it did on January 12th with the Selma tornado. So there's a lot of reasons why that happens. But I used to think like you did. I know where you're going with this, and I used to think like that too, that we were addicted to warnings. But I think it's more of a fear of missing something, and I think it's like you said, it's a culture issue that it's not a big deal. And Kim, I'd like to ask you this too, because we've gone back and forth with this and round. Does the false alarm rates really mean anything? Everybody's for a while used to say the false alarm is being too high, just like the tweet said. The false alarms are high. Nobody's going to take it serious anymore. But then we hear evidence that people are not that concerned about false alarms. So I don't know where that balance it really is.
Man, it's a tough conversation. And if I followed some of the content of that tweet right too, wasn't part of it that they were also saying slight risk doesn't mean like it wasn't enough to because the event was actually like overperformed. You called it slight and it was actually something really
no. What this guy was complaining about, he's complaining about too many risks defined by SPC where nothing happens where he is. And he takes a slight risk seriously. Most tornadoes here happen on a slight risk day. And there was a slight risk yesterday and nothing happened. And we've had a lot. It just seems like the number of false alarms is higher now in terms of watches. And that's what he's concerned about.
Gotcha. So yeah, I think the social science research is really mixed in part because we don't know how to define a false alarm from the perspective of the public. What does it mean to actually experience one? So one early study that tried to get at this just looked at, are people really good sensors of our warning boundaries? Do they know if they are in or out of boundaries that we set? And we find this like pretty extraordinary bleeding over effect where people feel warned even if they weren't even in the warned area. So there's a question immediately about, well, what is an alarm? And part of the problem is that a lot of the way that our warnings are diffused is through things that are very spatially imprecise. So technologies like television that are one-to-many communication, or things like friend networks, family, the kinds of things we were talking about earlier that can really help people to have heightened perception of risk, but are also not geospatially specific. Cell phones are a relatively recent innovation, that are more spatially specific, but people are still getting their information through this myriad of ways. And so there's a question from the beginning about what is an alarm. And even if we disregard that and just think about looking at sort of the alarm climatology, that's been another approach taken in some of these studies. You can see if people are in a place where they have a high false alarm ratio, compare those to places where they have low false alarm ratios. What do things look like? That even is a little messy because you can have some environments like yours where it's tougher to get, all the tornadoes in without having a high false alarm ratio. And so you have different forecastability in different environments. So there are some places where maybe they have a low false alarm ratio, but maybe they've missed a couple of events too, is a sacrifice to get to that. Some places don't have to worry about that. And we start to see just there is a trade-off to these things. And people in these different geographies are living very different response realities. And I think that's something that's just challenging for our field to handle, because we want to have a kind of one-size-fits-all policy, like a goal that everyone is shooting for that's the same. And if you go through a storm and there's a tornado and it's unwarned, there's what we call the asymmetric penalty function that definitely exists. People will not tolerate that. That can have very serious consequences. We have people who say they weren't warned even when there were warnings as it is, like it's challenging. And, on the flip side, the statistics show, even for those places where there are higher false alarms, that doesn't always lead to lower trust. We don't completely understand it. I'll be honest. It's something that's still a hot topic in the social sciences, and that part of it is just this difficulty of isolating in the real world. What are people experiencing? What is the warning? What is the alarm? You know, how are they getting it? What's the geography targeted? It could be that there are people who just don't get every warning too, and they're not aware there was a false alarm to begin with. There are so many questions that it's just a very difficult thing to say. But to what you said earlier, there is a paper that looked at the Weather Service after 2011, when this was a conversation that we thought maybe it's this high false alarm issue. There had been some areas where there had been a very strong recent uptick in false alarms right before the 2011 season. And, you know, Springfield, Missouri was one of those. And so was, you know, so were portions of Alabama. And you can see in some of the responses in the service assessment, people talking about that, like, oh, we've just had a whole lot of these lately. So if you have a recent bunch of them, you know, maybe that could become problematic. And you start to see the Weather Service respond in taking down the false alarm ratio. And that spreads from southern region through the rest of the Weather Service from one year to the next. Harold Brooks and Jimmy Correa documented this really beautifully in a paper in Weather and Forecasting. It's a must read. And it shows that we have this incredible power to decide where that threshold should be as an agency. And to have organizations that are able to change on a dime like that is unbelievable. Like the power we have and the amount that everyone in this agency cares to do the right thing. We want so badly to do whatever is the right thing. It's just a really difficult problem. But what we learned out of this is that if we do find a better place, a better solution, our people are going to be ready to just snap up a new protocol. So I mean, overall, I think we're all trying to just do the best we can. And where the social sciences yet, we kind of can't say the high false alarms are causing people to just ignore us. People don't want to die in tornadoes. But when you're inundated and you just have these slight risks day after day after day, just like you're talking about being exhausted, people on the ground are also exhausted. And you know what? You live in a place where you just might have a tornado every couple days or every day for a couple weeks. And that's just hard. And I think it just has to be okay for us to take a deep breath and realize people are going to be exhausted. Just try to empathize with them where they are and keep them motivated to push through for the little bit longer it takes to get through to that 2 days you have that aren't tornado season. So, I mean, you just have such a difficult regime. I'm so sorry. You asked a simple sounding question about false alarms. And I hope that if my soliloquy here helps you just to understand from our perspective in the social sciences, it's not a simple question. And we just don't think it's quite as simple as dialing one way or the other.
Well, you're certainly not wrong about it. And I remember two events stick out in my mind before the April 2011. It's late October. I think it was October 30th of 2010, and then April 11th of 2011. So the October event, I think we issued 31 warnings. All 31 were false alarms. And we had 2 tornadoes that day, and we missed both that we actually had. So even though we were carpet bombing with 31 warnings for a few storms, we still missed the 2 that we actually had. So I think that was part of it. And then turn around April 11th it was a weeknight in the evening. And I think it was Taylor Hicks was on American Idol, and we interrupted for 11 warnings with one little rinky dink tornado out of 11 warnings. And everybody was on wall to wall. And I think it just really, the crap hit the fan with that event because people were hot because Taylor Hicks he's a guy from Birmingham. Is that right? I remember, I think.
Yes.
And
yes.
On American Idol, and we interrupted that, and people were hot, and they were even hot with us for that. And again, it was another almost nearly 100% false alarm event for an evening interruption from 6:30 to 9:30, right in prime time. So I think that people had sort of had enough. So you're not wrong about those events leading up to the bigger events in late April. So.
Dr. Jacobs, did you want to jump in on the false alarm issue?
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is more of a question that's going to complicate the situation even more. But I think I agree with Kim on this asymmetric penalty if you miss one. And I think Kevin's spot on with this motivation of the carpet bombing sort of aspect of this. And despite probably the one-offs of interrupting American Idol, I wonder if the social science community, at least from what I've seen, spends a lot of time looking at how the Weather Service forecasters craft what they say to the public and how the public responds. But I'm interested to know what's going on in the mind of the forecaster after the public's response on social media. Like let's flip that around and look at it in reverse. Are forecasters changing their behavior because they're getting blasted for missing a storm on Twitter? I don't see a lot of people getting blasted for false alarms, not like I do for them missing a big event. And I wonder what's going on there. I mean, granted, the sample size is pretty small, but I can see it's really easy to go in the direction of overwarning from that perspective, because the response to a built up high false alarm rate probably happens over a long period of time, whereas the knee-jerk reaction if you miss one event is almost instantaneous.
Yeah, I think James could probably speak to this too. Some of the text messages he's gotten over the years, that the pendulum, at least here, is almost swung fully the other way, where it's like we're being way too conservative in some cases. I will admit I'm probably the most conservative one. And I've even put on the NWS chat before that, hey, I'm not going to chase these rabbits. I'm not going to sit here and try to get all these little tiny spin ups, because it's just going to be in vain for me. So please stay on wall to wall. Please tell everybody that, hey, you may have a tornado that could develop anytime. So you probably just need to wait till this line works its way out. I think we had an event like that earlier this year or yet last year. I don't remember, but I couldn't sit here and issue, because, we were going to end up with a huge false alarm rate, and people are, going to be in shelter for hours for absolutely no reason in a lot of cases too. So it just, it's a decision sometimes we have to make. And, to answer your question, I think the best I can, I think we get a lot of grace. I think people know it's tough business, and that they know we miss. And I don't think I've ever had anybody yell at me, but I've been on plenty of surveys where we've missed tornadoes, and I don't think I have anybody ever been a naysayer. It's just, a lot the ones that impact people the most, the killer tornadoes, we're not missing those at all for the most part. And I don't think we've missed in 15 years. We haven't missed an EF2 or greater. And so those are the ones that you obviously have the most impact and you don't want to miss, that could be potential life ending. So the little zeros and ones, we get a lot of grace, trees down, a lot of places, things like that. But so I think people have a good, in this part of the country, I think people have a very good understanding and give us that grace.
Well, we had an event, was it earlier this year, Kevin? I believe it was an enhanced risk. I'm not even sure we issued a single warning, but went on Facebook and said, hey, this is what some of you may call a bust or a dud event, and just explain what didn't line up in the forecast and why we didn't see, the tornadoes and damaging winds we were expecting. And the post had hundreds of comments, and I'm not even sure I saw one that was negative on there. They were all saying, we would like to have, the heads up that the potential is there, that something could happen, so we can plan for our families, or, for traveling or whatnot. So I don't know. It could be a case where, the people are upset or yelling the loudest. People are not upset that something didn't pan out. They're usually not saying anything, except in that case where, we pointed it out, and then they're showing, their support and whatnot.
I think it's good to go on and explain a lot of the science and technical stuff behind it, because I think, one, people are smarter than the general public probably thinks they are about this, particularly the ones dialing in. And if they don't get it, then at least they'll go home saying, wow, that's a lot harder than I thought. I mean, I remember probably 20 years ago, Greg Fischel going on TV showing a skew T And everyone was like, are you crazy? You can't show that on television. And of course, no one understood what it was, but everyone walked away going, man, that guy's really smart. Like, he understands all these crazy graphs. I mean, the other thing to keep in mind is no one goes on social media just to be like, hey, good job. It's usually someone who's like got an axe to grind. They want to be a jerk. And so there's this sort of mentality that the jerks on social media represent the consensus of society, which is totally not the case.
Yeah, well, and that's something hard for us too, because we're science people, right? We're not psychologists or psychiatrists, which is probably needed around here. And it's just, we don't know how to deal with people as well as some other, even the TV personalities can have great communication skills, know how to talk to people. We just don't have that here. So it makes it a lot tougher for us because, we didn't study that in school. And so it's not our number one thing in our mind. So we sort of have to navigate those waters carefully, for sure. And you're right. I mean, a lot of people will just go in there just to be kind of trolling or whatever. But it's funny you said that about this QT, because in this part of the country, I think James, you're a part of this, but we pioneered showing velocity on television. A lot of people never showed velocity. In fact, when we had, wall to wall, of course, came from this part of the country as well. And showing that those different products on television have been a game changer. And I remember going back and we talked about how, James, you could talk about it too, how the radar products you were showing were misaligned, and we had a data velocity quality issues where they weren't de-aliasing the velocities correctly. And what they said is wasn't a big deal because people don't show that anyway on television. How'd that go? How'd that conversation go?
Yeah. No, which event are you talking about, Kevin? This was what year?
This was 2011, the big outbreak when they said that your radar coverage was 5 miles off, and who cares about the velocity de-aliasing?
Yeah,
because they weren't getting the velocity correct.
It was a vendor, and he told me it wasn't a big deal. But come on, man, gosh, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but it was bad. People lost their lives because of that. There was deaths directly attributed to that. And, it was my fault because I should have had 2 radar sources out there instead of just one. I mean, you live and learn, but yeah, that's an example of some of the stuff we fight here. But this whole discussion is very helpful for me. I like to listen to smart people because I'm in the middle of it. The thing is when people get agitated, or if they like what they see, it's easier for them to find us instead of you two guys, the TV people. They know our Twitter and email and Facebag and all these other things, and they'll come find us. And what I like to do, guys, is to go into that Walmart in Adamsville. That's the greatest cross section of people we serve. I love that Walmart. Different ethnicities, different demographics, high income, low income, city, country. I love that Walmart. And I just like to talk to people. And it's not on the social media, it's eye to eye contact. And something about that, you can't beat that. And I love that. I took the 2 interns we have down there a couple of weeks ago, and I talked with people and I learned a lot. So that Kim, that's my test bed. It's the Walmart in Adamsville. So, but we're all learning. That's the one thing. My first major was engineering, and I finished in meteorology. I don't know anything about behavior, social science. I don't know anything about this stuff. Communication, having to learn it on the fly, even though I've been doing it for 1,000 years. So that's my hangout, is the Walmart in Adamsville.
This is one of those awesome conversations where 15 minutes ago I wanted to chime in about something, and now there's been so much other stuff talked about. I don't even know where to begin. But great conversations, Kevin. Always, it's great to have you. Great to have you on. I think what I really wanted to jump in initially was on James' comment about, are we overdoing it? Are we increasing the number of watches and warnings? I certainly don't see that at our office level. Certainly there's nothing intentional or directive or anything like that. In fact, like Kevin said, as I sit there, sometimes we're too conservative. Sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, are you typing the tornado warning? Is it, every once in a while it's like that. So sometimes we're even more conservative. And sometimes personality-based decisions kind of come into play. And we actually have to battle against people going in the other direction, not going in the direction of excited people on social media and television, getting people riled up. Sometimes people's mindset is, well, if I go the opposite direction, I can offset that. We have instances that have demonstrated clearly that will never work. So it's just interesting. You've got people involved in responding to the warnings. You've got people involved in issuing the warnings. And anytime there's people involved, you're going to have just a wide range of complicated factors that play into it. So not really a question, but I just wanted to agree with what Kevin was saying about actually it may not be going in the let's do more direction as it appears.
All right, am I up?
You're up, Jen. Finally,
Okay.
give us the
Yay.
shocked look face. We finally got to you.
Yay. No, I have a question that came into our weather. We have a WeatherBrains room in our Tornado Talk Discord server, and they're in there yakking and saying how everybody's just great. But they have a great question here about warning accuracy. Where do spotters come into play on this topic? We have seen some cases in the past year where spotters over-exaggerate the reports of a large wedge, and either it's a large wall cloud or a weak tornado, but there have been tornado emergencies issued because of this. So there have been a couple of issues of that. So I wanted to see if you guys wanted to weigh in on that.
Go ahead. Yeah, Jen, that definitely comes into play for radar operators. If a radar operator has social media up, sometimes you have to filter out quite a bit of stuff and don't let it get in your head. Because you always have people tagging the office with, radar scope images or radar mega images, whatever, saying, are you watching this? Or there's a TBS icon on my app. Why don't you have a warning out? And you just have to look at the radar data and the storm environment, like Kevin talked about, and go from there. But yeah, there have been some issues recently, like you mentioned, with spotters maybe misidentifying or even sometimes exaggerating what they're seeing. In our storm spotter talks, we always say report what you see. And if there's some sort of terrain blockage or whatever going on, just kind of describe what's going on. I see a large lowering. It appears that it's rotating, but I can't tell if it's in contact with the ground because there's a ridge line or trees or whatever. But unfortunately, there have been some cases where the storm on radar and the storm environment is conducive for potentially a tornado or even a significant tornado. Maybe need to upgrade the warning. The spotters are just not quite identifying properly what's going on, and that can sometimes, unfortunately, cause warnings to be issued and it ends up being a false alarm, or you upgrade a warning to considerable catastrophic tag, and that's really not the case. I think you mentioned the one in Wyoming. Was it east of Cheyenne? I think it was actually in the Nebraska Panhandle where it happened. But there's a large wall cloud and there was some terrain feature blocking it, and so it created the appearance that there was a wedge tornado, which several people reported it as. And I believe the Cheyenne office upgraded to a tornado emergency, and I think they barely found EF2 level damage in the town that storm went through. So that's definitely something we have to filter as a radar operator. If someone's reporting a wedge, is the radar data matching that? Are you seeing strong velocities? Are you seeing a debris signature? Is the environment even conducive for that? So a lot of things you got to filter through for sure.
James A., did you want to jump in? You've had some great comments in the chat.
Yeah, like what Rick said, it's just the ebb and flow of this conversation in the last 15 and 20 minutes has been incredibly valuable. And one thing that we talked about this on the show before too, that meteorologists have to be particularly aware of. Just because we can zoom down to street level radar doesn't mean that it's accurate. We saw that in central Oklahoma with the Cole tornado, and really that wasn't that far from the radar. But there is false precision, or a lack of accuracy and false precision in that. It looks very precise, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's accurately locating where a tornado is occurring. And, it's something we have to really be cognizant of and aware. And that's a tremendous temptation to just zoom right in and say, it is here. and it's moving here. Well, maybe not.
Yeah,
And
Brian Peters used to talk about that a lot.
Yeah, and it's and the
some
whole
of his
thing is
thoughts.
the whole thing is so complicated, as Rick said. Anytime people are involved, but I mean, the warning operator making a warning decision is just the start of this entire chain of cognition from the warning recipient. And two people in the same family may hear the warning at the same time from the same media and have completely different perceptions of their personal risk. So it's enormously complicated.
Yeah, I would encourage you to reach out to the Tulsa office too, because the one thing that we have an advantage over the television meteorologists is that we get to go out and survey these and talk to everybody who was impacted all along the path, and the stories that they tell. Because I always ask the same question: how do you get your warnings? How did you know to take cover? And a lot of themes start to come from that. And one that's more and more recent has been, I wait on my TV person to call out my street. You talk about street level. And so they're waiting to hear their street before they begin to move and take action. And I don't know why that's the case, but it happened with the Beauregard tornado, and Josh Johnson was on WSFA, and a lot of people in Lee County were following him. And they took shelter when he called out their street. And usually you're calling out the street when it's right there on them. And it's like you literally have about, within seconds, it's going to be on top of you. And so I guess that's better than trying to run the shelter when your house is coming apart. But at the same time, just you're asking for it if you're waiting on your street to be called out, because there's just, like you said, we're not that good. And so the perception that they have is amazing sometimes.
So, Gerald, you sort of broached this a little bit, I think. We had Hannah Strong from Louisville on last week with her famous dad, Greg Sankey. But we asked her for a John Gordon story, and she told one from the previous weekend when the TV Mets were sort of goading the Weather Service to issue warnings based on what they were seeing. And he eventually did issue a series of 2 or 3 warnings, and then came back and said, see, this is why we don't do that. And I thought that was a very interesting comment. Do you ever feel pressured by the media or by the folks in chat or whatever? Have you ever had that situation come up?
Not personally. Usually, the radar operators kind of focus on the radar data. There are occasions, we're trying to rapidly search for reports that are coming in that you may have TweetDeck up or something like that. And you really just want to look at the TweetDeck for reports that are coming in. And like I said, you see everything else about people tagging us. Why don't you have a warning out for this and that? And like I said, you just have to, it can get in your head, a little frustrating, but you just got to focus on the mission. Like I said, look at the storm data or the radar data and the storm environment and go from there.
Usually I'll say this, a lot of times they'll say, are you watching this storm in chat? Well, of course I'm watching it. What do you think I'm doing here? It's like, you don't need to ask.
You think so?
I'm definitely watching. Yeah, exactly. It's just like, are you trying to talk me into something here? Or you're not being successful, but it's just like, don't ask me that, because I'm definitely watching it. So it's not a problem.
Like maybe they'll catch you not watching one storm. Kevin, give us some hope for the future, phased array, things like that. Any cool things that we can talk about? The rest of the panel can chime in.
I got 3 things for you. I'll rapid fire them for you. One, have you guys ever had on David Roosh from Auburn? I know Kim knows him.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had him on the
we've
show
had
yet?
him on. Yeah, he was.
Okay.
He was on, and he was a great guest.
Yeah, he's come up here and talked a lot of it. I don't, don't have a lot of time left, but we don't go down the rabbit hole of this manufactured homes and how they're anchored and stuff. And having him back to discuss some of the anchoring techniques that we've discovered along the way is shocking. So we talk about people getting the warning, but there's this whole other elephant in the room about substandard housing. And it's just that trying to get people to leave that seems to be the challenge, if they even know about the weather in the first place. I'm not convinced that 50% of the people in our CWA here in central Alabama doesn't even keep up with the weather at all. So that's one aspect. Secondly, there's a whole different community besides manufactured homes that we've seen more and more of, and that's the Spanish-speaking population has, come about, especially in this part of the country, and a lot of those folks are very, very vulnerable. I'll let Gerald speak to that because we went to an event in Pelham a few months back, and so we're trying to do a lot of outreach. We have a student here this summer from Florida State who speaks Spanish rather fluently, so he's going to help us with outreach, especially with papers and brochures that we can take out that make sense for people. And it seems like the meteorology terms are very confusing in Spanish, just in general. So they mean different things to different places where you may come from. So education in that area is very difficult. You want to speak on that?
Yeah, there was a pretty cool event that was hosted by Pelham City Schools. I guess English is a second language department, and it was geared toward, in that area, Pelham, mainly the Spanish-speaking community. But yeah, our number one flyer that evening was a flyer on mobile and manufactured homes, and it basically had a 1, 2, and 3. Like, what do you do 3 days out if there are severe weather forecasts? What do you do 2 days out, and what do you do the day of? So it's basically planning you through, like, know where your safe place is, and then how you're going to get there, sort of thing. But that was our number one flyer during that event.
Hey, Kevin, I'll back you up here with what you just said. Being chair of the CBM exam review committee, we now have a Spanish language CBM exam for broadcasters. And Kevin, we had people that were fluent in Spanish that took so long to translate that exam because so many terms that we would have thought would have flown in Spanish that were equivalent to the English meteorological terms would not work. They meant different things. And when you said that, it just rung the bell with us because we had to sit there. This took longer getting the CBM exam in Spanish than we really anticipated. Really, a lot of hardworking people in the AMS, Spanish speakers, got involved in that. But I want to second what Kevin says about that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Troy. There's, a few weeks ago, the Weather Service sent out an email, for rip currents. I can't even remember the word. Is it Reseca or something like that? They were using for rip currents, and in other parts of the world, it actually stands for hangover. So you're giving some people hangover safety.
Yeah.
So,
and some people need that.
Show titles.
Some people need that. Okay. Not sure it's the Weather Service responsibility to give that.
But we're lucky to have a new
has...
television meteorologist. Oh, Bill, are you talking? Yeah.
No, go ahead.
There's a new broadcast meteorologist here, Shanti Rodriguez. She's with the Telemundo station. So I think their main studios are over in Atlanta. She's the only one that works here, and she works from home. But we're definitely going to be relying on her to help us out, especially during our outreach events. So she helped us at that event in Pelham, and she did awesome with getting people up to the table and then walking them through the flyers. And, they were just collecting all kinds of stuff off our table. So she'll be good to help us out during our outreach events, and maybe we can do like a few Facebook Lives with her or something like that leading up to a big weather event. And I believe there are plans for her to somehow maybe get into the WBRC studios. I guess they're under the Gray station. So she doesn't work at the studios right now, but maybe in the future she'll be there in some capacity. So
yeah, she would make a great guest, I think, too, to talk about that outreach, because it's such a critical part, and the population is just growing in that aspect too, and we're really behind the curve on some of that.
Kevin, was there anything else you wanted to mention?
Yeah, number 3, I have a student coming next summer who's going to start on my map project to figure out how many people can read a map. So I'm going to get some official numbers for everybody, and we're going to really try to unravel the map. The thing behind me here, it's just second nature to us, and it's so difficult. We got this quiz that we're going to give out and talk about where you live on a map, and try to get to the bottom of some of those statistics. So the goal there is, we're going to take out maps of SPC's outlook over the state, and we'll ask, based on where you think you live, what do you think your risk, and how do you perceive that risk for today or whatever. And that's what we're going to try to do and get to the bottom of that, with the goal of us redesigning what we're doing here to try to get the most people that we can get. So I know there's been issues with, what about this town? What about this? And you get those all the time. And I'm like, look at the map. It's right here. You don't have to ask me what about, but the fact is they just can't read maps. They don't know where they are on the map. And
well, Kevin, I want you back on this show. I want to hear the results for this. Absolutely. I agree completely with you and Gerald.
You're gonna be really shocked and disappointed. I got a feeling, because there are a lot of people. I'm reminded of the Barons in town here, the Birmingham Barons. It's like I guess a AAA team, and they have a safety night that we go to, and I went last year, and we were passing these out, and I had a police sergeant who did not know where he was on a map. And this is the guy he's a supervisor. He's not a regular police officer. He's the supervisor of the police, on his shift. He didn't even know where he was on the map. And it's just the thing that shocked me the most is you think you could put a group of people, a demographic in that doesn't know, and that's not the case. It spreads across gender, it spreads across education, it spreads across a lot of boundaries that you wouldn't think it does. And it's a universal, it seems to be a universal thing. And you got the phones, right? And everybody navigates with their phones and the GPS and those era. And it's just, they don't know direction. They don't know north, south, east, west. And so it's just, how do we overcome even that challenge? And we're going to have to eventually get to a point where, you are told what to do basically on your cell phone before people will probably take action. I think that's sort of the next thing coming down. So,
Dr. Tucko McLean, can we find a way to gamify that somehow?
I think I would love, Kevin, if you're up for the challenge of it, let me know, and I'd love to be on your project team to work with you. Is the student going to be a geographer?
I think she's sort of a double. She's meteorology, but she's also, I think, trying to minor in some of the social science. I know that's a broad term, but I think she's going in that direction because she, has a greater interest in the social aspects of it than the actual science. So I think it's sort of a double thing there. So absolutely, you can be on it. And in fact, we're trying to put together a meeting here in a couple of weeks to sort of jumpstart it and get it going and see what we need to look at. And I'm not going to make the mistake of designing the experiment. I'm just not going to even try. I want somebody else to. We sort of have this little preliminary thing we do, but we're not good at that. So I'm going to have. Yes, the answer is yes. I need your expertise
Do
on
it,
how
Kim.
to design.
Do it.
That's what I have so many ideas of things to be easily executable, but I think would just help to prod around that question in some helpful ways. So it's an important question, and it's in the modern communication era, it's not a very simple one. So there'll be a lot of good things to think about. I would love to work with you on it if you are up for it and you know how to get in touch with me.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing, the sort of the prelim work we've done with it is, most people need a secondary confirmation after the weather radio, so they cut on the television, and the wall-to-wall television folks, they're quickly going through maps, they're quickly going through risks, sky cams, they're going through a lot of stuff, and when they get to the radar map again, people it takes them at least 5 minutes or more just to orient themselves where they are on that map, because it's such a hard thing when it's like second nature to us. It's like, what do you mean you don't get it? And people take a long time to try to figure out, and I think that's where the brilliance of naming barbecue places or Walmarts or whatever, that's where the brilliance of that comes in, because it helps people sort of navigate where they are, unfortunately, but that's the way it is.
So before we take a break, National Weather Service Chat 2.0 rolling out. Any comments, guys?
Go ahead.
Old hat, Birmingham.
Oh yeah, that's supposed to be rolling out. Was it August 1st, Kevin?
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be a big. It's not officially out, but some of our EMs on broadcast Mets, James Fanny, you were in there the other day. Big improvements, sharing of video and photos and that sort of thing. It's much easier to share reports and actually see, this house is damaged. You can actually see the photo of it, and it's just, probably going to be more stable as well. So big improvements coming August 1st. I know there've been a little bit of chatter about, the weather bot in there. There are going to be some improvements to that, so you don't have to click on it. I guess you have to click on it twice to see the full text product. So there'll be some changes with that, but it's definitely going to be a major, major improvement.
So is this rolling out nationwide or just for the southern region, or who's getting access to Slack when it goes operational in a few weeks? Is that everybody or just some?
It's everybody. Everybody now. It's being rolled out. Every weather service office is opening it up to all their partners. However they decide to do it, we're doing it in multiple phases so we don't get overwhelmed by 900 requests in 2 days. But so yeah, every office has it, and it's kind of been the, hey, let's get familiar with it because August 1st, the old chat goes away, thank God. So yeah, it's going really well, but I don't know about John and your team there, Kevin, and at Birmingham, but man, it's almost like a full-time job doing this for the past 3 weeks. We do 4 or 5 webinars a week for training. It's very popular. People are really excited about it, but it's not just flipping a switch and hoping for the best. I mean, we've got some very specific guidelines of how we're going to use it in our office versus, what you can do. Anyway, we're trying to keep it from spiraling out of control, keep people like James A. from getting too excited in our chat room.
Does it have a pun filter on it, Rick?
We do have a fun filter. The presentations I give say, yeah, we're it's like we're going to give you a new car, but we're not going to let you use the cruise control or any of the cool stuff. We're going to just start slow, but again, it's office by office. It depends, but yeah, it's a big deal.
Well,
Ken Graham is he's an old friend of the office here. He was in town a couple weeks ago, and he was former MIC here a while back, and he's the director now. And a funny story he told us was that when he walked in, day number 1, when he walked in, he said, "Let me see the plans for Chat 2.0." And they, government speed. The plans were for the next 2 years. This slow rollout. He's like, none of that. I want it done. It's going to be done today, and here's your deadline. And so he's pushing those kind of things to get done because he's the kind of guy that likes to check off something on the list. We're going to the next thing. So there's no way it's going to be 2 years on his watch. So he's like, I want it done in 6 months, and here we are, August 1st. It's rolling out without all the red tape.
And let me just say this to broadcast Mets that are listening here. I've heard some broadcast Mets say they don't want to get involved in it or they're not going to be posting video or images for the weather service to see that they receive because the other channels are going to steal my content and I'm not going to let them do it and I'm not going to get on there. I mean, really, is this 3rd grade romper room here? I mean, if the weather service needs to see some of the content, show them the stinking content. The competition doesn't matter. We're all doing the same thing here. We're trying to mitigate loss of life. So please don't act like a 1st grader here.
Well, as Rick Smith says, maybe they'll stop showing it on TV because they don't want their competitors to see it either.
Yeah, I mean, goodness gracious. It's just a very strange place in society here. But we've got to pause. And we're going to hear from Tony Rice, and then we'll get Jen's This Week in Tornado History. We'll do some email. We'll come back with the weather roundup. We got to talk about the flooding in Vermont. That's really serious. So we got some pretty high-impact weather events going on here. And we'll do picks of the week and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Mars points the way to Regulus, the brightest star in Leo this week. Look west after sunset. You'll first see Venus. It's at its brightest this week. Up and to the left, look for a slightly orange point of light. That's Mars, some 211 million miles away. Now, the white star that's about a finger's width below, that's Regulus. It's also known as Alpha Leo because it's the brightest star in that constellation. Regulus is the bottommost star in the backwards question mark that forms the front of Leo. These subsections of constellations, they're known as asterisms. Things like the Southern and Northern Crosses, as well as the Big and Little Dippers. They're all asterisms. Constellations, on the other hand, those are more official things. The modern list of 88 constellations was recognized by the International Astronomical Union, the professional organization of astronomers, back in 1922. A few years later, borders were drawn around each one of those constellations. And it's those borders that serve astronomers by defining neighborhoods in the sky that can be used to easily describe where new discoveries can be found. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, July 10th, 1989. 17 tornadoes occurred across parts of the Northeast. 2 were given a rating of F4. For Thomas Grzoulis from significant tornadoes and also storm data, one of the F4s was more than likely a part of a family of tornadoes that hit parts of eastern New York State. The second F4 slammed into New Haven County, Connecticut. For the Storm Prediction Center, there have only been 2 recorded F4 tornadoes in the state of Connecticut since records began in 1950. This F4 tornado on July 10th, 1989 developed in Hamden, devastating the Highwood area. Close to 350 homes and 40 businesses were destroyed. The tornado moved along a skipping path and ended just north of New Haven. Over 30 streets were blocked by fallen trees. For Thomas Grzoulis, tree damage was still being cleared a year after the tornado. There were no fatalities from this tornado event and 40 injuries. We have more details about this event and hundreds more at tornadotalk.com.
Ooh, time now to dive into the email inbox and let's see if anything is in there this week.
All righty, I've been holding on to some emails over the past few weeks. This one came in mid-June from Harvey Day Jr. Storm chasers find iPhone-sized hailstone from Texas thunderstorm from Fox Weather. So when I clicked on the link, it was our friend Dr. Jana Hauser, and she was holding this 5.5-inch diameter hailstone and comparing it to her iPhone. So thank you, Dr. Jana, for doing that and making Fox Weather here. And I have 2 things from James Lewis. I'm going to go for the first one here, which this made me chuckle. This email was back about a month, well, about June 15th, almost a month ago. First of all, he had a question. So we want to see who wants to out themselves. We've all heard about forecasting mistakes and blunders, but for those in more media-oriented roles, what was your worst mistake while reporting on the weather or giving a press conference or similar? Anybody want to out themselves? Have we ever talked about this, our biggest blunders? Now, I'm not going to talk. You have to go back to read the newsletter if you want to read about my blunder. I wrote about
true. Jen had a pretty good one.
It was funny.
It was worth reading the newsletter for.
Yeah, go read. So yeah, but yeah, anybody have any blunders? I've read the wrong out cue before and done those type, and then people are like, Jen, what station are you on? And I'm like, I don't, apparently the one I was just on, not this one, because I read the wrong out cue. So I've done that before. But anybody?
There ain't enough time in the day.
No, true. Yeah, same thing here.
I think my worst one, it was a late night marginal severe weather event, and Master Control was basically handling the situation. We didn't have a director there, and I did a finished the cut in, and thought we were back in programming, and the Master Control guy fell sound asleep. This was like 1:30 a.m. And so I went back to the bathroom. Okay, this was
no.
This was not the number 2, but the number 1, and that got on television, and so
wasn't that in one of those Police Squad movies? Or
it was, but you always, I don't care, you always turn that mic off before you go in that bathroom. I have learned my lesson.
Yeah, mine was related to an Alabama football broadcast because I used to do the weather, in the pregame. And I was in Miami, so they had given me this number to dial so I could, talk to the folks in the booth. And this number that they'd given me to monitor, I'd written it down, and I thought it was some sort of, number that people paid to call. I gave it out over the air. And as soon as I finished the forecast, they were like, Bill, that number's not for publication. That's how all the radio stations that don't have satellite hookups get the feed back to their broadcast. And I was so embarrassed because they had to change the number after that.
Yeah, I was going to say that number changed that day. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, and this was a cute addition to the email. He has a goofy idea for show 1000. And instead of gathering at an event or restaurant, because that's boring, we should all go fishing with Dr. Neil Jacobs.
Yes.
I don't know how good
I like
fishing is at that time of year, but I'm sure you can find some place to catch the redfish or fight off sharks and alligators and whatnot. That's usually what we're going to get into when we're hanging out with Dr. Neil. Taylor Swift was in Cincinnati, and so John Wilkinson let us know about how they did a heads up there. I'm sure you guys read that story about they did a heads up for the concert. She started the concert early to be able to get things done, and so the storms showed up when people would have been letting out the original concert time. So thank you for that email. And then James Lewis had one more. It was about heat-related illnesses. This was from just last week. As high temperatures persist through parts of the country, some areas have recorded heat indices of 100, 105, even 110. The question I have is, how does the volume of heat-related illnesses and deaths scale with the rise in heat index? How many more instances of heat-related illnesses would occur at 110 versus 105, for example? Is there anybody from the Weather Service have questions or answers for that?
Yeah, I don't have specific numbers, but we did a study about 10 years ago with some doctors at UAB who were studying that very thing across different spectrums of Alabama. Another huge educational issue with heat, and I'll share a story with you about that real quick. But we directly work with the Board of Health here in the state, and there is a significant rise. I don't want to even guess at your numbers, but every single degree it goes up. Really starting at about 100 and upwards. It's almost exponential how that increases because there's so much outdoor construction and things going on. The educational part of it, the doctors had interviewed several people who would come in, and a guy was out cutting trees. It seems to be cutting trees, and he was suffering heat, and he was in Camden, Alabama, which is down where James sort of grew up down there, and his wife called the ambulance, and she made him walk in the sun out to the end of his driveway, because they lived on a real rural route, to the end of his driveway, and stand out in the sun for another 45 minutes waiting on the ambulance to come. So that's how they didn't know what was wrong, because heat kind of hits you afterwards. It doesn't really hit you during the moment, so you don't really know what's happening to you. So that's just another education thing that we got to work on.
We sure do. Thank you, everybody, for sending your emails to us. Email at weatherbrains.com. And don't forget to sign up for our newsletter, where if you look at this past 2 episodes ago of the newsletter, publications ago, you'll get to read my funny story in Kansas City. But we do articles and history and all kinds of fun stuff on the newsletter. You can sign up by going to our homepage and clicking on the little link to subscribe. Back to you, James Fan.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink, by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
Some really serious flooding up in the Northeast United States. Neil, have you been watching that at all? Neil Jacobs?
I'm down in Charleston right now. We got a bunch of heavy rain here today, just pretty slow moving storms, but I think the flow is going to be more northwest and then kind of out of the west for the next few days. So it should clear out down here, but it was hot and muggy and felt like almost like tropical moisture.
Yeah, this Burlington, Vermont flooding just looks horrible up in the Northeast United States. So pretty serious stuff going on there. Jen, how you doing?
I'm doing good. They're saying that's the worst that they've seen since Irene hit that area. And I do a station up in Northfield, Vermont. So we were talking about that today. And many areas have picked up anywhere from 2 to 4 inches. That's been the average, but some areas have exceeded 7 to 8 inches up in that area. It's just pretty awful. Quiet here in the Ohio Valley, just a little warmish today, but not too bad. We're about to pick up the rain again, though, and we get pretty active mid to late week with rounds of thunderstorms coming my way.
So, James A., the heat dome, is that going to stay west of you next couple of weeks?
I think we've kind of got 2 days of it coming, Wednesday, Thursday. So we'll go with that red weather ball getting red for warmer temps. Our issue is going to be the humidity, just from all this rain that we've had with these continual nocturnal MCSs. We'll probably pop heat index values of 110. with temps in the
Lo-
mid to upper 90s, which is
Lovely.
atrocious humidity. Awful.
Lovely. All right, Rick, Kim, what's happening down in Norman?
Pretty much what James talked about. I mean, it's June and July. It was June and let's see, it was May and June. Now it's June and July. I don't know what comes next, but just lots of MCSs, lots of flooding. We've had some big storms with wind damage recently. So another round expected to come through late tonight, early tomorrow morning. Then we do switch over to about two or 3 days of more typical July weather, and then we get into a more unsettled pattern again. Personally, I'm not complaining about, it not being 100 degrees, but it is like a sauna out there with all the rain and moisture. So it's always something. You're going to pay for it one way or another.
Let's go down to the Inferno correspondent, Troy Kimmel, in the Inferno.
Inferno or Infernal?
Yeah, either one.
Okay, thank you. Up to 105 officially at the in-city urban heat island site of Camp Mabry today here in Austin. And again, it's just the ridge. I mean, it's either we're on the east side of it or it backs a little to the west, maybe by the weekend, but not far enough to mean much difference. Got a couple of thunderstorms through parts of Texas tonight, and a couple of those developed back to the northwest and north of Austin a little while ago. We still got one severe storm up northwest of Abilene right now that we're watching, producing 1-inch hail. At least the radar suggests that. Don't really see much change. I mean, it's the 10th day of July. I'm not sure that we see much change around here through the month of July. When you get down to it, 8-14 day offers no relief from the Climate Prediction Center. So see how it goes. Be glad when this breaks, and I'm hoping for that El Nino break sometime, by September. I'm looking forward to that.
Be interesting to see the peak heat in Phoenix with this ridge over the next couple of weeks. It looks
and they're
pretty brutal.
Trapped. That lid is, it is on top of them. It goes nowhere for those folks.
Yeah.
And last week at Weather Service down at New Braunfels, I noticed the heat index again by late in the weekend. We're still looking 108 to 112 or 113 on the heat index. And so good luck, and hopefully we'll see you again next week.
Goodness. And let's see, Kevin and Gerald, 88 today. No rain, no storms. How about that for a break, huh?
Yeah, we get a little 2-day break here before we jump back into it again. So it's been a wild El Nino filled summer so far. So
storm fatigue is real. I mean, we've all got it down here. Normally in June, that's when I kind of wind down, take a vacation week. It just didn't stop. It did not stop. And I am thankful for the day or two break we get here. But anyway, let's morph over into picks of the week. This is where everybody's going to share something weather related that is very cool. And we'll put the links up on weatherbrains.com. Let's go to Kim. Kim's always got a good link. Go, Kim.
All right. Well, based on the conversation we had tonight, it's a little bit of a self-serving one. Well, just something that I wrote. But it was a quick response grant report based on the work I did in Alabama and Mississippi, and the small piece of it where I was looking at answering the question, can people figure out how to orient themselves and where they are in relation to a storm? It's a question that sort of relates to the map question, but applied to, can they figure out basically what's going on? Are they aware? And so I thought you guys might be interested in checking out that report.
Indeed, that sounds good. Thanks a lot, Kim. Let's go to Dr. James Adelot, who's got to be on TV here in a few minutes. Go.
Well, my picture of the week, I'm trying to remember exactly what I said. Oh, yeah, I know what it was. It was Matt Meister, who is the chief meteorologist at Fox 21 in Colorado Springs, and his co-anchor was doing an interview with a snake expert, and she's obviously, by the question she's asking, deathly afraid of rattlesnakes. And as the interview's ending, he sneaks up behind her with a fake snake and drops it in her lap, and it is live TV at its finest. To say that it scared the stuffing out of her and every other thing is amazing.
Wow. All right. I don't have the nerve to do that in this day and age. Maybe 20 years ago. No, this is not happening.
Still alive.
All right. Jen, give us a good pick of the week. Go.
I found an article. It's the National Weather Service in Chicago and the Des Plaines History Center grabbed historical records, newspaper articles, property maps to determine the location of the May 22nd, 1855 Chicago area tornado. And it's considered the first twister to hit the Chicago area that we are aware of. And so this is an article from the bulletin of the AMS. So I'm sharing that link. It's very interesting.
Excellent. All right, Neil, Dr. Jacobs, what you got for us this week?
So I got an interesting email from a friend just asking if they were going to buy a laser, what kind of wavelength should they get that would cause the most destruction?
Oh.
And I didn't know the answer. So I went to this website. I found this website. It's called 405nm.com, stands for 405 nanometers, which is in the violet range. And they've got a set of online calculators. And you can calculate everything from like wavelength color to RGB, frequency, wave number, laser divergence, photons per laser pulse calculator. It's pretty great. So I figured if you're in the market to buy a laser, whether you just want to point it at the sky or you want to burn holes through walls, you got to check out this website.
Wow. Only on this show do you get this information. No other show but this one right here. Wow. That's outstanding. All right, Rick Smith, go give us something good.
All right, the service assessment for the December 10th, 11th, 2021 tornado outbreak was finally released a couple of weeks ago. So that's on the website with all the other service assessments. I was one of the members of that team and got to interview all the offices involved. So really, some really interesting findings. Maybe we can talk about it a little bit more detail on another show, but that's finally out there. So that's my pick.
Very good. All right, Troy Kimmel, go.
Hey, quick mention, and there's no link with this, so don't be looking for that tonight. But I want to kind of point out something Kevin said just a few minutes ago. Last Friday afternoon, we had a great National Weather Service partner workshop online, and Ken Graham was there with us. He talked to us for better part of an hour, 15, 20 minutes, answered any questions. I brought up the NWS app stuff, so I'll have to be in jail for the next 20 years. And we can never talk about that again. But Ken was pretty straightforward with what he said on that. And then I brought up something about our NWS ASOSs, which a lot of these are FAA, but there's some NWS. And I really firmly believe, not that I don't have trust in the FAA, but bottom line is I'm hoping that we can create our own set. We are the experts in weather observations. Meteorologists are the expert. The FAA is not an expert in weather observations. And so I have pushed, and AJ was online from headquarters, observation program leader, about setting our own requirements for our ASOSs. And that includes opening up ceilometers on these devices the NWS owns. Let's get down to business. We are the experts in weather observations, not the FAA. And so let's grow a pair, Weather Service, and let's get that done.
And that would be a good show title.
Yeah,
let's grow a pair. All right, so let's go over to Kevin and Gerald. I know you guys always have something good, so go.
Mine this week is a little bit unique, but they last week on July 4th they unveiled the world's largest LED sphere out in Las Vegas. I don't know if you saw that or not, but they've been scrolling through a couple of those, and there's one that has the global satellite imagery, and it's pretty neat. That's something I definitely want to check out if I ever make it out that way. So anyways, you just Google search it, YouTube, and there's videos of it all over the place, but it's a very unique looking phenomenon.
All right, Gerald.
All right,
go.
Mine's along the lines of outreach, specifically the Spanish-speaking community. So there have been some graphics you can share on social media or embed in web pages, whatever you want to do with them, that have been recently uploaded to the NWS Weather Ready Nation webpage. So the link to that is weather.gov/WRN Weather Ready Nation /Spanish. And there are a bunch of graphics in there ranging from seasons of different hazards. So there's hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding, wildfires, anything you need that you want to share with your Spanish-speaking communities locally that is available on that webpage.
Very good. And we got to get Shinty on the show. She's just great. She's a very important player in this market as we try and reach different people groups. All right, Bill Murray, go. Give us something good.
Yeah, James, I just wanted to give a shout out to our buddy Tony Rice's newsletter that he sends. In a few minutes, I'm going to get to go out and watch the International Space Station go over. And that's just one of the cool features that he puts in that, personalized to your location every week. So reach out to any of us if you're interested, and I'm sure he'd be glad to make sure that you have access to that, because it is one of the coolest things. And I've just given all the shows for the next month or so over to Kim, because I think she's got a really cool lineup of people. So Kim, we'll check you back in mid-September. Just keep us in guests till then. How about that?
I'll do my best, man.
But thanks to Kevin and grabbing Gerald. That was a real treat tonight, Kevin, that you brought him, because we've been remiss in not having him on the show. We appreciate you guys for what you do in our backyard all the time.
Absolutely. Glad to do it.
And I was going to say my pick of the week, it's some of the flooding in Vermont from the Vermont State Police, a tweet that they put out today. So Kevin and Gerald, anything else we need, any other business from your side before we wrap it up here?
We are clear here, sir.
All right. In that case, we're going to put a wrap on this one. If you're new here, we typically do WeatherBrains Monday night at 8:00 Eastern, 7:00 Central. A lot of people watch it live, the video version, youtube.com/weatherbrains, but most of you listen, and we are thankful for that. If you want to get in touch with us, the email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless. Thanks everybody. Great show.
Oh, good to see you guys.
Thank you. Great to be here.